Now, one thing that I need us to look at, right, is when people think or when people feel, hey, this thing just happened in New Mexico, Judge Glanville needs to look at that and make a new decision based on his Brady evidence violations that the state or that the Fulton County District Attorney's Office has had during this YSL trial. But you need to understand, let me put this on the screen. This is about binding versus persuasive, right? And this is really dealing with how does courts or how do courts have to use case law when evaluating whether or not to make a ruling, based on whatever factors we're dealing with, right? Oops. Okay. So binding versus persuasive. Let me just read this first piece up here because I think it's important, right? And this I think is geared towards law students, law school students. So I think it's really this is what they go by, and this is how they understand it in the legal field. You have found the perfect case. The facts are similar to yours, and the law is on point. But does the court before you, before which you are practicing, have to follow the case? Stare decisis is the common law principle that requires courts to follow precedents set by other courts. I'm saying it like this. If I'm saying it wrong, somebody let me know. Under stare decisis, courts are obliged to follow some precedents, but not others. Because of the many layers of our federal system, it can be difficult to figure out which decisions bind a given court. This handout is designed to help you figure, okay. Now, binding versus persuasive authority. What's the difference? Let's look at it here. A binding authority, also referred to as a mandatory authority, refers to cases, statutes, or regulations that a court must follow because they bind the court. Persuasive authority refers to cases, statutes, or regulations that a court may follow but does not have to follow. Ask yourself two questions. Are the legal issues in your case governed by state or federal law, and which courts are you in? Now, let's go down to this beautiful chart down at the bottom because I like a good chart. Now, this is what we're looking at here. Binding authority, persuasive authority. So if you are in a state trial, so you have a state issue and a state trial, the only binding authorities that you have to follow the ruling of is the state appeals court and the highest court of the state, which would be the Georgia Supreme Court in this case that we're talking about, the YSL case. And the persuasive authorities are federal courts, other states' courts, and other state trial courts in the same state, right? So essentially, pretty much, so Brian Steele could put in a motion and say, hey, this thing just happened in New Mexico. And it doesn't mean like Glanville wouldn't have to follow it or Rachel Krause wouldn't have to follow it, but she could say, okay, that's good information. The argument sounds similar. The case sounds similar. That might persuade the type of decision I make, but it doesn't mean they have to follow it. They wouldn't even have to follow a federal ruling like that. That's just persuasive. They only have to follow what the appeals court says or what the Georgia Supreme Court says, right? And if something is said at the Supreme Court, or if there's a ruling that comes from the Supreme Court, the only authority they have to follow the ruling of is the Supreme Court, right? They don't have to follow federal courts or no other state or no other trial from another state or another state's appeals. They don't have to. They can if they want. And if you are at the Supreme Court level of a state, they don't have to follow anybody else's, not the federal courts, not the highest courts in the feds. State Supreme Court is the highest level of anything related to a state issue or state criminal trial or any type of trial. State's court is the top of the top, right? So keep that in mind as we go forward and people feel like we should be using some type of state law or some type of other state's ruling to make some different determinations when it comes to this YSL trial. However, Georgia has their own Brady rules themselves, and they have been cited many times in this trial. And the Judge Glanville feels like even though some violations have happened, he's still, not only is he not dismissing the case, he's still been allowing the state to get the evidence in that's violated rules. So I'm a little interested in how he's been justifying that. I don't even know if he's been justifying it. He's just been saying, I'm gonna let it in over objection, and then they just go forward with it. Let's see what the people have to say about this here. Michael Real Key, what's good, bro? Finally caught the stream. I appreciate it. Summer for life. Glanville isn't built like this judge, real. Val Powell, I wonder if it could be revisited though, because Glanville kept dismissing the defense every time they attempted to discuss or object to Brady violations. That's facts. Okay, Hippie Easter said I'm saying it right. Okay, so that's stare decisis. Yeah, Wise Brooks said that's for appeal. Esquire is starry decisis. Okay, starry. I know it's a Latin word, but it's make it bigger. I know it's Latin, but I couldn't sometimes that Latin is a little that Latin is a little funny money sometimes. I know that this is small. This is small, but we're doing the best we can. Well, can y'all see that now? The state only has to follow this now, like I said, this comes from something that they've been teaching law students. So this is essentially like by the book version. It doesn't mean every judge is, it just means by the book, this is what should be happening, right? Because this is text. This is what they're teaching law students. So now let's discuss what we saw this week. Let me make this a little bigger. Just in case anybody wants to screenshot this, I'm going to make it bigger for a few seconds before we move on. In case y'all want to screenshot that, you go ahead and screenshot that thing right there, letting you know what's a binding authority versus a persuasive authority. Y'all screenshot that. Make sure you screenshot the regular podcast logo in there with it, because we trying to grow the brand and everything like that. And shout out to y'all. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to screenshot that. 5, 4, 3, 2, and we're out of there.